Okay, thank you very much. Hello, YouTube. All right, so we went through making static web pages here. Now, what's kind of interesting is if you go into S3, S3 is okay with you putting any file at all up here. The problem is you don't get control over the server, so you can't write any server-side code. And usually, you write some plain old Java objects or PHP that sits on the server and that listens for connections. And that creates an architecture where your audience gets a page, and the page makes a request back to the server, and the server then touches the database. So there's really 3 hops. Serverless just means that you have a web page that you put on the server, the client gets that web page, and that web page communicates directly to the database. So there's only 2 hops. So A, it's cheaper, dramatically cheaper. It's just like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times cheaper, and then it's vastly faster. And then the interesting thing is because there's so many less moving pieces for you to manage, the hackability of the website is dramatically less when you go static single page website. Okay, so I think there are a couple. Oh, sure. Yeah, I had a student who's asking me if you could explain the difference between a single page website and server-side websites. Imagine, okay, whenever you're doing web development, it's what we call N-tier, T-I-E-R. And really N-tier means that you have various levels where data can be located. Most websites have data source, be it a little bit of data that's stored for you in RAM, like in Facebook, which stores all the posts that'll fit inside of your wall. That data is accessible in RAM that is changing all the time. Or like when somebody adds a new post to your Twitter feed, Twitter prides itself on speed. So Twitter, Facebook, they've kind of grown up in the same environment. A lot of the same talent has shifted back and forth between those places. And interestingly, the guy who invented Google Maps he was a rock star. He invented, the Ajax involved with Google Maps is you kind of drag the map around. It kind of creates this infinitely draggable map. The person who created that eventually became Brett Taylor. He left Google to form FriendFeed, which became like a one-stop shop for all of your various social feeds. Facebook bought that and said, Brett, become our CTO. So Brett Taylor introduced the real-time wall, where your wall is updating in real time all the time. Now that's very interesting because Brett looked across, he looked across the bay over at Twitter and said, okay, what they're doing at Twitter is that whenever somebody posts a tweet, that tweet shows up in millisecond time. And people at Google were experimenting with Google Now, and which was very quick results. So that means that there's data that's happening behind the scenes that your users want to get in touch with. But understand that no matter if you're Twitter, Google, Facebook, or you're everybody else, everybody has to deal with a concurrency problem. So there are many, many people who are trying to touch your data. Your data is what makes your site worthwhile, right? Your data is more valuable than probably anything else, because it's giving you a consciousness of the world as it changes. It's valuable. So you understand that you have a data source. But in order to have the data source, there probably needs to be a farm of many servers that is holding on to that data. So if your client wants to touch that data, probably they need to get to that data somehow. PHP, as a tradition, says that, okay, install a Linux instance back in your server cloud somewhere, and then that PHP will talk to the MySQL database somewhere. And there'll be a little bit of SQL that is issued against that database. But imagine millions and millions and millions of users hammering your website, and every time one person touches your website, multiple SQL queries have to take place. Eventually, it becomes a swamp, and it becomes hard to scale upward from that. So what Facebook would begin to do is to get away from the querying of the MySQL all the time, and they instituted caches. And so what would happen is Memcache is really the way where you would have data that would be for you, that would be put inside of your cache, and that you would get access to that cache and that cache only without real-time queries into the rest of the. So what we're really saying is there's the MySQL layer where all the smart stuff is happening, like the machine learning and the querying and the clustering and the associations, all the valuable stuff is happening there. Then once that data is crunched, it's put into a cache, and that's very cheap access. And basically the client accesses it, but they access it on a non-SQL basis. So those are just two different types of data that happen back on the server. So if you talk about N tier, well, N means fill in the blank. How many tiers do you want? So probably there's that deep learning tier, then there's the superficial, immediate Google Now tier, where you're just going to take a snapshot of the most recent data. And the Facebook wall is a very good example of that. So the next part of the problem is, how do we move that cache data down to the client HTML? The HTML is kind of like the storefront. It's kind of what the user sees. It's this. What needs to happen is there needs to be either a server that enough people attach to that will connect to either the cache or to the MySQL instance to get data down to the HTML. So already you have 3 hops. You have your cache, where you have data that you want people to have. You have your Linux instance that gets the cache, and then the Linux instance encodes that data in JSON or what have you, XML, JSON, most popular, and then that moves it down to the HTML. So the HTML, the server, and the cache, 3 tiers, n equals 3, right? Now, serverless says, look, you need to have the HTML. The HTML is necessary to talk to the customer, to make an experience. NPR are big fans of single, and let's try to avoid the political stuff, lest we want to click it, like, oh, Wisconsin, But NPR, they have this gorgeous user experience. They're big S3. They love S3 single. And not many sites are using S3 single right now. Just a couple of kind of progressive, NPR is one of them. They have this gorgeous HTML. You got to have that. But then you want to actually just grab the data. And then you just want to move the data right down to the HTML, right? So what Amazon is proposing is that you do what's called a serverless website. Correct. So N tier decomposes to 2 tiers, the data source and the HTML on the web page. Now the web page assumes that the database here is actually run by a server somewhere. Guess what? There's actually Linux instances there that are running that database somewhere. But it's just not, we don't need that middle tier to move the data down to the middle tier back to the client. The client can actually request data from the database server and then move the data back down. It's just JSON at the end of the day. So what you have is you have the AWS Jas SDK, which is really where this is getting done. Like some other very brilliant people are not doing it on Amazon, but the rest of us are doing it here in Amazon. Our focus here at Cal Poly is corporate productivity enhancement. Make the economy run better. Don't reinvent the wheel. Reinvent business process. That's what we do here in CIS. That is patentable in itself. And let's face it, a business like Uber, what have they invented that is original and proprietary? They are an application. They're an application of good stuff. Now, my apologies to Uber, they probably have some awesome patents that are out there, but in reality, they're just a great mobile app company. It's just databases. Pinterest, incredible company. They're really just about MySQL in the back end, just applying, so in a brilliant way. But here you have JavaScript in the browser. What's really incredible is they say, what? No server required? Are you kidding? So you are saying that I can just make an effective website only connected to the data, no server. That's correct. So you're going to learn about how that works. Frankly, you need other people, you need Facebook to authenticate your users. So if it weren't for Facebook, you couldn't do serverless. You need a third-party authenticate, like a Kerberos, offering a ticket to people. And then Amazon will accept that authentication ticket and say, hey, wander around my cloud with your authentication ticket. And you can run your own authentication, or you can use great third-party auth like Google Plus or Facebook, web standards. So people just kind of click, use their Facebook account to get access to your site. Everybody's doing that. Facebook has wheedled their way into all of our developer lives. We allow them to do that. They're good for that. So, you use a social login. So the next thing I really want to tell you guys is you understand how that single page is going to work. And we're going to fill in those blanks. Okay, so stay tuned. Hit subscribe. Just kidding. I think there's like 4 subscribers to this. And I have way more students, so no one is subscribing. It's fine. You guys are paying my bills. I don't need you to, get me. I don't want cool ads. That's not what, you can click on the ads if you want, but that's not what this site is about. So what I want you to do next, I want you to go get Bootstrap. Now, Bootstrap is this piece of the web that we can't seem to let go of. It's like the oil of the web. Like, can you get a car without oil? It's hard. There's not many alternatives to oil. Get Bootstrap is kind of the oil where Twitter made Bootstrap a number of years ago, and since then, everybody has been using Bootstrap to make incredible looking websites. So what I want you to do here is I want you to download Bootstrap. So go on over there, download Bootstrap. You notice here that they actually host. If you look quickly at the URL, they're actually hosting it at S3 to Amazon. If you watch, it's like a subliminal messaging campaign. So you go on down to your Bootstrap in your downloads folder, and what you do is you're actually going to make new HTML files that will be right next to all 3 of these folders. It's a very elegant, very simplistic way of making websites. And frankly, I'm going to propose Bootstrap to the newbies because guess what? Because we have Bootstrap, everybody can make great looking websites with a marginal amount of effort, nowhere near the amount of effort that it used to take. Therefore, it enables new business process to take root. So people should have better websites because of the presence of Bootstrap. Now, the next move here is I want you to go into Eclipse or whatever web development tool that you're using. And I'll just kind of demonstrate what I do in Eclipse. What I do is I want to make a new, don't do it with me, just do it later. Just get the idea. I want to make a new web project. And let's try to find it here. A web project. I actually just want to make a static web project. Now, frankly, that is the least sexy. You look at all these incredible projects that you can make inside of Eclipse, be it Android or run a machine learning project or run an Amazon Web Services project or do web development. I am choosing the least sexy kind of, or servlet, good Lord. I'm choosing the least sexy project that you can make on Eclipse. And then I'm going to make that racy, and I'm going to call that my sample web builder. And I have so many projects here that I need to kind of name it in a certain way so that it sticks out. You don't identify a runtime because we're not going to use any servers. We're not going to build up any Linux instances. And just go and next your way through here. There's no runtime. And then all of our HTML is going to be put inside of web content and finish. And then the way that Eclipse likes to work is you're going to kind of go into the Project Explorer. And I happen to have named it with the number of my class so you can find the number. Look at how many projects you kids forced me to write. Like, that's a mess. But I love you for it. I'm sure it'll subtract years of my life. So here is web content right there. And my move right now is I actually want to take this and I want to import all the stuff that I just downloaded from Get Bootstrap. Okay, Get Bootstrap is really JavaScript, it's CSS, and it's other assets that help you make great looking websites. So we're going to grab that, and let's grab this dist. Dist stands for distribution, and we'll open that. And there's going to be a number of things that are going to be inside of that. And if I somehow fail, I'll just come back and fix it. I mean, it's possible for me to get it wrong somehow. But what I've got to do, and I'll come back and fix it, I'll show you how I did it. But what you want to do is when you're developing, and I have a working project here, is when you're developing, you actually want to have all of your assets right next door to itself. So here's a website that I'm going to be using as a little bit of a sample. And and you can just drag all that stuff in here. You have your CSS and your Bootstrap and your JS and your images. These are all things that I got from my Bootstrap distribution. You technically, instead of doing it the fancy way, you can just kind of drag it into your project. And I'm going to avoid doing that. But if I did want to go up here to my 311 project, I could technically drag it right in there. So we could probably just drag it into wherever it will take it. Copy it, files and folders, OK, and just do it the dumb way. And now I've got Bootstrap inside of my project. So the JavaScript that's needed to run the cool Bootstrap features is there, and then the different fonts and the cool graphics, the cool visuals that are inside of Bootstrap are there, and then the cool CSS is there. The CSS is what I'm going to kind of zero in on as we go forward, because the CSS is what enables us to code HTML. HTML is a function of your CSS. Never do HTML without CSS. So the very first CSS, the very first HTML that you're going to lay down is going to be CSS enabled. You guys will never know the web without CSS. CSS will be your way of doing things. There is no other way of doing things. Do not do them any other way. If you get used to doing HTML without it, you won't want to change because it requires your brain to really learn new stuff. So I just want to say, just as I close this up, I believe that Mercedes-Benz, we're talking about one of the world's great consumer brands. They've usually had great websites. Their website for the past few years has been pure Bootstrap. And you can kind of see what happens. They've been, I think, moving away from that very recently. But for a number of years, their website was just basically plain old Bootstrap. So what you do when you're in the Get Bootstrap website, you're in the Getting Started period. Getting started. I want you to go down to the examples. And what we're going to be jumping in on is we're actually going to be loading up various examples of how to make Bootstrap work. Here's a really good one. And this will kind of teach you how to code with Bootstrap. There's a couple of skills that you need. And let me quickly, the next thing that you can do, and this is taking it one step further because I want to get you, the next thing is you can get into your browser. All browsers have this, be it Chrome, Firefox, Safari. I don't know IE. Sorry, I just don't. You go down, you inspect the element. Now, in the past, we'd say show page source. That's messy. Inspect element is the way we've been doing it for a few years. And this kind of additional kind of UI appears. And what it's doing is you realize that it's highlighting, it's showing you the HTML right here that you guys are going to code. But then it's highlighting what that actually looks like when it's implemented by the website. So up here, I just want to show how this works. You're actually grabbing a style sheet right here that points to Bootstrap. And because you have that style sheet, you're now able to take advantage of all the styles, like a class that's called page header. And this is a style that's called div column medium 4. And that's located right here. So this entire row of columns is styled using this class called row, which is fundamental, and then this column class. And so you can very quickly put together information architectures for your site before you begin the data side coding behind the scenes. So that's kind of the quick round trip that I want to take, right, just for right now. And so what I want you guys to, what I want you girls and guys to do, I don't know if I can call a mixed classroom full of girls and guys just guys. So I'm waiting for somebody to put their hand up and say, I'm triggered. That's okay. We'll need to call you something different. We'll need you human beings. If I said you people, folks may not like that. If I call you folks, you might be insulted by that. So I don't know. There's no way that I can avoid insulting you. So I'm just going to insult you. You will be guys. You will all be gender neutral guys at this point. Deal with it. But what I want you guys to do when this is finished is I want you to get yourself your own Bootstrap, download it. Then I want you to get yourself your own cloud. Go and get it. You will have the basic building blocks of web development ready to go right now. And we can use that as a platform for you to make very cool experiments and to learn. It's always going to be this way. And let me say this. The CSS will unlock the style of the website. You know, the real flavor, you know, when you get a great website,